Hey there, it's Dan, and you're watching The Salty Sea. And this morning I found myself getting pretty excited for the Warhammer preview, so thought I'd round it all up into one video and put it out there for people to see. So we got a whole bunch of different new stuff today to look at, and even though none of it was for my favorite game, Warcry, it's still really fascinating and really cool. So let's get into it. Starting with Kill Team. Um, Kill Team is sort of the skirmish game for 40K, like Warcry is for Age of Sigmar. And this box set looks really promising. I'm really excited about it. So there's Necrons versus Space Marines, of course, which is what they're doing for the most part in 40K right now. And it's got two different sort of kill teams in it, a bunch of different indoor terrain. It kind of seems like this set is a little bit Catacombs inspired, or maybe they were building the two at the same time. Seems like it's got kind of an indoor setting. Um, those sort of green pools remind me of the Catacombs lava. There might be some invisible walls there, which sort of lets hobby folks create them themselves, I suppose. Sort of interesting, seeming like they were, you know, building in parallel. And um, it's also interesting that they're tying it into the main storyline here, which is not something they did before. Like they had a Kill Team Rogue Trader, which was sort of totally independent of what was going on with 40K. Um, so that's kind of an indication that for these skirmish games, Games Workshop is trying to sort of really have them be introductions to the main game. We saw that with Warcry as well, with the Grand Alliance books that came out for destruction, death, order, and chaos, sort of marrying maybe the Warcry concept with the main Age of Sigmar concept. It is really cool to see these games getting continued support. It seems like these are going to be part of Games Workshop's plan to stay. But unfortunate news for maybe people who really fell in love with some of the original Warcry only warbands. This is just a little bit more of Games Workshop inching away from that direction and towards the direction of using these as intro packets to the main games. So then after that, we got a news about a new Broken Realms book, which is really exciting. So for those who don't know, Broken Realms Marathi was a book that they released for Age of Sigmar in the fall that was really cool in terms of how it pushed the AOS story forward. Marathi ascending to godhood, lots of interesting new stuff happening, totally new Slanesh direction. Um, and so I'm excited about, what could happen along those lines here. Um, they also gave us a video that had sort of Teclis meditating, Teclis being grumpy, Teclis marshaling troops, and it seems like he's going to be invading Shyish or Nagash's realm of death, which I find exciting just because Age of Sigmar started with, the Stormcast sort of on the offensive, trying to establish these free cities. But for the most part since then, the forces of order, the good guys, have kind of just been sitting by. And this happens in a lot of other properties too, not just Games Workshop games, where the good guys are kind of sitting on their hands trying to defend their towns, while the bad guys are the only ones who do anything interesting. And so for this book to be implying that, the Luminesce who are, supposedly on the side of good, or they're at least in order, um, actually getting on the offensive and doing something interesting is really positive. Um, they've also got a list of which factions are going to be in the book. And so Lumineth and Cities of Sigmar make sense. Bone Reapers and Flesh Eater Courts is really interesting. There's no Legions of Nagash there, but two Death Armies and some of the cooler ones, in my opinion at least. And then Maggotkin of Nurgle is really interesting. Nurgle being a chaos god, of course, you wouldn't think would be in a order versus death battle, but of all the chaos gods, he calls himself a life god. Whether he is or isn't is up for debate, but because he at least thinks of himself that way, he has sort of a special hatred of Nagash that the other chaos gods, they don't like Nagash, but they don't particularly dislike him either, except for Nurgle, who really dislikes him. So it kind of does make sense that he'd be in here. And then the Teclis book is being sort of followed up by new releases for Teclis's crew, the Luminesce Realm Lords. And I absolutely love the Kangaroo Riders, even though I've heard of quite a few Luminesce players not liking them. And I do think that Games Workshop might have made a bit of a mistake here, because these Kangaroo Riders, while I love them, probably aren't enough to make me get into Luminesce. But they might do the opposite for some people. So to give a different example, so I listen to a lot of sort of writing podcasts. I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan. He has a podcast where he just talks about kind of the craft of writing. And one of the things that they always give as advice for new writers is to make a promise to your reader in the first couple chapters, and then to spend the back half of your book fulfilling that promise. Now, that's not exactly saying that there's going to be a happy ending or anything like that, but it is saying that your first couple chapters need to indicate to your reader what the tone is going to be like, whether there's going to be surprises and character deaths or not later on down the line. And then as you're writing, then you have the tone that you say it's going to be. You either shock your reader or give them something comfortable based on what you're subtly indicating to them in your first couple chapters. So if we go back to the sort of first preview video of Pointy Elves that Games Workshop released, that says nothing about kangaroos, right? And this other model, which I think is incredible, is very pointy, but isn't one of those sort of pointy elf type things. And so Games Workshop made a promise to their fans, to their high elf fans, that they were going to get high elves in Age of Sigmar. And they did give them a couple units, just the spearmen and the archers and the kind of boring horse cavalry that were very high elfy, but that was kind of it. And then otherwise, they're making very Age of Sigmar-y type things that I think are amazing. This incredible sort of flying fox archer is just really inspiring to me. I love the fan of arrows on the back. I love the kind of blue wind flames that are coming off of the drawn arrow on the bow. I don't necessarily love the tornado, the ribbon tornado that's underneath it, but that's fine, right? You have to get it in the air somehow. And the model itself, I think, is really cool. So just because I think it's cool, though, I think it kind of is almost made to not appeal to the high elf players who wanted something like Silmarillion elves, right? Like the old Gondolin before it fell to Morgoth type of stuff. Lord of the Rings Tolkien elves. That's what I think that they promised to fans, and what they delivered was something that, it's not quite strange enough across the line for me to sort of drop everything and start a Lumineth force, but it's also not high elfy enough. So the high elf players who are upset, I get it. I understand, and I think that GW kind of did you dirty, even though for me this is pretty cool. Then the other thing they've got is a new vampire warband for Underworlds. Now, this kind of, I think, also indicates the direction they might go for the rest of their vampire releases. So they've got sort of different characters here representing different bits of vampire stuff, a little bit from the old world. So we've got this man stroking his giant mace here, who is very Von Karstein-y. And then we've got this sort of blood dragon guy on the left, and then the sort of double cutlass woman in the center there is sort of New Lamia-like. And then, we've got this Batwing guy on the right. I actually really love all four of these as far as sculpts go, and I really hope that when they do release the army, they get Warcry rules, so I can play them in my favorite game. I know they never release rules for specific characters from Underworld's warbands, but a lot of the Underworld's boxes are really good starting points for Warcry. There's a ton of situations where you can buy just one Underworld's box and then one box of sort of a foot infantry, and you have a Warcry warband because the Underworld's box has variety, and then your foot infantry box would have kind of your main chaff unit, and then you have a full warband with a few different options available to you. I hope that's the same thing here. On the preview stream, they mentioned that all of these kind of feel like characters, and so if you could mix and match these as your leaders and then get a box of, whatever new comes out that's sort of the basic foot troop, and sort of fill the warband out with that while mix and matching any two of these, that would be really cool. And it would be great for Warcry. And so to get more into sort of what these releases mean for the future, they did show us a Vampire Lord last week. I really like it. I think it's sort of vampires brought into Age of Sigmar a little bit more than the Underworld's warband was. A lot of people didn't love the bats carrying away the hair, but for me, that's what makes it sort of strange and whimsical, which is what I associate with the AOS kind of fantasy, right? It's like mythical, strange fantasy rather than just sort of straight up Tolkien or straight up Transylvania fantasy that the old world was, that I find a little bit less compelling. Still like a lot of old world stuff, but I do like the direction of Age of Sigmar overall, and I think that the bats are what make this Lord AOS-y. But of course, if you don't like them, you can always cut them off. I do wonder, though, if we're going to see this release be sort of, let's say, expanding on the Underworlds thing and having this sort of 4 sub-releases like the Underworld's Court did. This Vampire Lord on the left here does remind me a little bit of the Blood Dragon guy from the previous one. Yeah, so if we go back here, this guy on the left kind of reminds me, could easily be friends with this Vampire Lord. So should be interesting to see where they go there. Seems like we're quite a ways away from the main part of that preview coming out, though. Then the next exciting thing that we saw was Warhammer Quest Cursed City. And this is going to be sort of a standalone game, which is kind of cool in and of itself. Something you can play with folks who aren't super into Warhammer and, they don't need any kind of introduction to get into it. And so it looks like it's going to be from the mini site, which is now up, sort of a 5-on-5 quest game of 5 heroes and 5 evil heroes. And they gave us a cool video showing kind of the aesthetic that they're going for, which I really love. And then they showed us 2 of the heroes. So we've got this sort of, I think it was like Jesslyn, vampire hunter, and then like Groslev, the evil shovel man. I make fun of his shovel, but I actually think he's pretty cool. I think this whatever covering on the top half of his head is really horrifying. In a really evocative sort of way. And then the vampire hunter, I just think has too much detail. I would hate to paint him, but for people who like it, that's awesome. If you don't mind getting into different leathers, it could be a pretty cool project for you. And I do think that these quests, I've never played them, but it sounds like the people who like them really like them. So I'm really glad they're making a new one. Then a couple minor notes that I just wanted to wrap up with. New Daughters of Kane battle tome coming up on the way. I didn't catch the preview stream for this part of it, so just baselessly speculating here that the heart will be some sort of defensive buff. The snake will put out some damage, and then the swords, they might also be damage, but I think they could also be like an offensive buff piece. I really want to get them to make them into kind of an alternative weapons cache for Catacombs games. Right now I use the metal swords from a different Endless Spell thing. And I think in general, just the endless spells for almost all the factions make for really cool terrain pieces if you're not using them for their stated purpose. And I think they make great terrain for either game system too, which is really cool. And then I also just wanted to put the Battle Tome up here because this is actually my favorite piece of Daughters of Kane art that they've come out with. Just in general, I just think the pose of the snake archer is really cool there, and the facial expression is really evocative. And then finally, last but not least, I know that they previewed this first, but I'm not really a 40K fan, so I figured I'd cover this last. They're adding to the grand tradition of um, order, or not order, imperium baby carriers. So this is some sort of Sisters of Battle warrior who is stuck in a mini dreadnought, just like the Invictor warsuit, just like the Grey Knight's baby carrier, and I find all three of these a little silly. I do like a lot of the 40K dreadnought type sculpts, but these three, I just think, of course you would just shoot at the person inside. She doesn't even have a helmet on, neither does the guy on the left. Um, so what's the point of dealing with this dreadnought when you can just shoot the person inside? But that's just a personal aesthetic thing. Um, if you find these awesome, then they're awesome. Um, if you bought the Grey Knight's baby carrier, and well, this one just goes right along with it. So there you have it, sort of a roundup of all the fun new stuff that came out today. Um, a lot of really exciting stuff, even though my favorite game was not part of the preview. I'm still excited, and I'm still excited for the implications on Warcry that a lot of this shows. I think we will get rules for um, those vampires in Warcry. I think the Vampire Hunter is a great alternate model for a lot of Cities of Sigmar teams, if you're into that. Um, and then I think the Kill Team box is a really cool sort of preview for what could be in store for Warcry. We've heard a lot of rumors about a potential AOS 3 coming out that'll be some sort of destruction versus order book. There's a lot of stuff in the story teasing that uh, Gorka Morka type of stuff. Iron Jaws and Moon Clan are gonna be trying to invade Azir at some point, and if this Kill Team box is a good indicator, then we could get a new Warcry box that would be some sort of Iron Jaws versus Stormcast Warcry situation. So I'm excited for that, and I'll be returning with more specific Warcry content in the future. Until then, may all your rolls be crits.